The night was supposed to be flawless. My husband's family had turned our lake house anniversary dinner into a gleaming photo-ready spectacle: white candles, imported wine, crystal so polished it looked like it begged to be photographed. Even our 7-year-old daughter, Hannah, sat straighter than usual, her little silver dress catching the chandelier glow. For a moment, it almost felt like the version of family they always pretended we were. Then I saw the envelope. Cream-colored. Tucked beneath my father-in-law's plate. Half visible, like someone had shoved it there in a hurry. And the corner, creased. As if someone had gripped it too tightly. I didn't know what it was yet, but something in the room shifted the second I spotted it. My father-in-law, Leonard, lifted his glass and tapped it twice, an attention-getting habit he'd perfected long before I joined this family. "A toast," he said, his tone thick with something that wasn't quite celebration. "To Michael, and to keeping our circle strong. Even when some people complicate things." The table went silent. Every fork froze. My pulse pressed against the inside of my throat. Michael didn't look at me. He kept adjusting the cufflink I'd gifted him last year, pretending he hadn't heard the jab. But everyone else had. His mother, Patricia, gave that tight smile she used whenever Leonard crossed a line publicly, and she wanted everyone to act like it was a joke. My sister-in-law, Grace, glanced at me with the pity of someone who enjoyed watching a storm gather. Even Hannah's smile faltered. Leonard wasn't finished. "Some of us forget that a family business requires loyalty," he added, swirling his wine. "And confidentiality. God knows we don't want certain documents slipping into the wrong hands." The room turned colder than the lake outside. Documents. Confidentiality. Wrong hands. I kept my voice even. "Is there something you'd like to say, Leonard?" He smirked, and his thumb brushed the envelope. "Oh, I imagine we'll address it soon enough. But not tonight. Tonight is festive." The envelope. The strange emphasis on confidentiality. The timing. It was too deliberate. Across the table, Michael finally cleared his throat. "Dad, maybe we can." Leonard held up a hand. "Michael, don't. You've already done enough." My husband looked like a man caught between two fires, one he'd started, and one he hoped would burn out on its own if he pretended not to notice. The candles flickered from a sudden gust of air, though no window was open. Or maybe that flicker came from inside my chest. Something was unraveling, and Leonard's smug confidence told me he believed he controlled the unraveling. Dinner resumed with the forced chatter of people pretending nothing had happened, but every sound felt warped, stretched thin across the tension. And every time Leonard shifted, his hand brushed that envelope like it contained the final punchline of a joke I wasn't supposed to hear yet. He wanted me anxious. He wanted me guessing. He wanted me silent. I watched him. I watched the envelope. I watched Michael pretend he didn't see me watching either of them. Behind every polite smile, someone was hiding something. Halfway through dessert, champagne-soaked cherries on dark chocolate mousse, Leonard leaned back, wiped his mouth, and said casually, "By the way, Jenna, I hope you're prepared for tomorrow's board review." I'd hate for avoidable discrepancies to embarrass the family. My fork stopped midair. He knew. Or thought he knew. And the satisfaction on his face made my skin prickle. Michael squeezed my knee under the table, a warning to let it go. I didn't even look at him. If he thought he could silently direct me like a child, he'd forgotten who he married. Leonard raised his glass again. "Ah well. Tonight is about appearances, isn't it?" Then he added, almost sweetly, "Do try not to ruin this family's reputation again." A murmur rippled across the table. Patricia's eyes widened with the kind of fear that said she agreed with him but wished he hadn't said it aloud. Grace straightened, waiting for me to crack, to defend myself, to make a scene they could later blame me for. But I didn't. And that unsettled them more than any outburst ever could. I looked at Leonard calmly, calculatingly, and said nothing. Because silence is its own kind of promise. Before dessert plates were cleared, I leaned slightly toward the camera, well, the place where viewers will be picturing me, and spoke in my narrator voice. If you've ever had a family member hint at secret documents at exactly the wrong moment, tell me in the comments, when did you realize something was brewing, and where were you? Then I straightened, still watching Leonard, and ended part one with the same quiet vow echoing through my mind. If they'd prepared something for me in that envelope. They had no idea what I had already prepared for them. 2 weeks earlier, the lake house anniversary dinner wasn't even on my radar. I was buried in quarterly reports at the office. My department had just secured a major logistics partnership, a deal I negotiated myself. It was the kind of win that should have lifted everyone. Instead, it seemed to rattle the people who were supposed to be on my side. It started with a voice I wasn't meant to hear. I had stepped into the hallway outside the conference room to answer a message from Hannah's school when I heard my sister-in-law, Grace, behind the half-closed boardroom door. Her tone was sharp, irritated, and hushed. "She doesn't need to know yet," she murmured. A male voice, Leonard's, answered, "She'll find out eventually." Grace replied quickly, "Not before we're ready. Keep her in line until the review. After that, she won't be able to argue anything. Keep her in line." I froze. I know when language is meant to control, not collaborate. I'd heard similar tone in boardrooms, but never aimed at me. I took a slow step closer, careful not to make the floor creak. Leonard added, "Michael will stall her. That's his job. If she starts asking questions, we remind her what's at stake." My stomach dropped. Not because I feared them, no, I'd survived worse from competitors. But because they were coordinating. And they believed my husband's role was to keep me distracted. I waited for another clue, but footsteps approached. I moved away just in time, pretending to scroll my phone as Grace exited the conference room with her sleek, practiced smile. She greeted me like nothing had happened and walked on, heels clicking like punctuation marks behind her. The seed was planted. Something was coming. Something they didn't want me part of. At home, I studied Michael. He was affectionate in a strangely structured way. More calls during the day. More, just checking in. He cooked dinner twice that week, which he hadn't done in months. But whenever I asked about his parents or the upcoming board review, he redirected smoothly, almost rehearsed. "They're just stressed," he said. "You don't need to worry. Everything's normal." Yet his eyes never held mine long when he said it. One evening, after Hannah went to bed, I found him in his office, closing his laptop faster than I'd ever seen him react to my presence. "What was that?" I asked. "Just emails." "From who?" "A client." I'd been married long enough to know when a man is lying. Not cheating, no, this wasn't that flavor. This was business. Family. Something deeper, colder. I didn't push him. Not then. I needed to watch first. Over the next week, I noticed the small pattern shifts that only a strategist would catch. Patricia stopped sending me the weekly financial summaries she always forwarded, claiming she was busy reorganizing. Leonard canceled 2 meetings with me without explanation. Grace asked for access to documents she'd never needed before. Even the executive assistant seemed instructed to route calls differently, always away from me. A coordinated pattern of exclusion is unmistakable once you learn the shape of it. Then came the second seed. I was leaving the office late, floor nearly empty, cleaning crew arriving, when my phone buzzed. A new email notification. Subject, draft, before she finds out. My breath halted. The sender was a company alias account, one normally used for generic board communications. But the to-line listed only 2 names, Leonard and Grace. And the message preview showed a single line. "We finalized the transfer at the review." Transfer. My blood ran cold. I opened the message fully, but it wasn't there anymore. Deleted. Not by me. I checked trash. Nothing. Spam. Nothing. Recently deleted. Empty. But I had seen the subject line. I had seen enough. Someone sent it accidentally. Someone panicked and erased it fast. But not fast enough to stop the notification from showing the first 6 words. Before she finds out. They were planning something behind the board review, something involving a transfer. Shares? Voting rights? A forced reassignment? They knew I'd be a problem, so they were preparing for secrecy. I drove home without radio, the message replaying like a drumbeat. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Michael on the porch through the windshield. Hands in his pockets. Shoulders stiff. Watching the street like he was expecting someone. Or watching for me. He rushed to greet me as I got out. "Long day?" he asked, voice too light. "You could say that." He kissed my cheek, but the warmth felt placed. As if he were trying to buffer something he didn't want me to question. Inside, Hannah ran into my arms, anchoring me. I held her close, smelling her shampoo, reminding myself exactly why I needed clarity before the board review. Before whatever they thought they could pull. Later that night, when Michael fell asleep early, I stared at the ceiling, piecing everything together. The overheard conversation. His sudden behavior shifts. The deleted email. The growing silence around me. Something was coming. And before they found out what I knew, I would find out everything. That was the moment I made my decision. By the time the anniversary dinner arrived, I would be ready. Back in the glow of the anniversary dinner, Leonard's smug grin made perfect sense. Everything he'd hinted, discrepancies, documents slipping into the wrong hands, his tapping on that envelope, fit neatly into the pattern I'd been assembling for 2 weeks. They thought I was walking into this night blind. They thought they were orchestrating my downfall behind starched napkins and polite toasts. But I'd already begun pulling threads. Still, seeing that envelope so casually displayed at the head of the table was like staring at the fuse tip of a firework they believed would explode beneath my feet. I wasn't sure yet what was inside it. But I knew its purpose: humiliation. Control. Leverage timed for maximum impact. When dessert plates were cleared and coffee was poured, Leonard placed both hands on the table, leaning forward with deliberate theatricality. "Before we end the night," he said, "I have something to share with the family." Every muscle in Michael's face tightened. He knew. Or he suspected. His jaw flexed the way it did when he was about to stop a blow he didn't have the courage to redirect. Patricia murmured, "Leonard, please, not now," but her tone lacked conviction. Grace crossed her legs and angled her phone subtly, recording. Of course she was. Digital trophies were her specialty. Leonard slid the envelope forward, letting it spin slightly under his palm. "Inside this," he said, "is documentation, real documentation, that pertains to the upcoming board review. I believe it is best addressed in a family setting, before things become unnecessarily public." My heart didn't race. I wouldn't give him that. Instead, I let stillness settle over me. Because stillness unnerves people who expect panic. "What documentation?" I asked quietly. Leonard smiled, the kind of smile men wear when they believe they've already won. "Financial inconsistencies tied to your department. Sign-offs that don't align. Approvals that were misplaced." Michael swallowed hard. He wouldn't look at me. This was their angle. Manufacture incompetence. Damage my standing before a vote. But something else lingered under Leonard's words, a tone, a confidence, that told me he believed he had proof. Something planted, something manipulated, or something designed to be misinterpreted. He lifted the envelope. "This contains the discrepancies and the preliminary transfer proposal." Transfer. The word echoed like a gunshot through everything I had pieced together. So it was about shares. Control. Positioning. A redistribution of authority that would conveniently occur right as they painted me as unstable, negligent, or unfit. Grace tightened her grip on her phone, leaning subtly closer to capture my reaction. I didn't give her one. Instead, I asked, and why wasn't this shared with the full board? Because, Leonard said, you don't bring a scandal to outsiders before giving family the chance to correct it internally. A neat little trap. Patricia added softly, let's just keep tonight civil, Jenna. The implication was clear, don't challenge him. Don't question the envelope. Don't make a scene. Open it, Grace whispered, excitement sharp in her voice. Go on. She wanted the footage. She wanted my shock, my stumble, the crack in my composure that could be played back, frame by frame, as proof of guilt. Leonard pushed the envelope closer. You'll want to review this before tomorrow. He waited for me to reach for it. To show fear. To break rank. But instead, I slid it back toward him with one finger. I'll review it when the entire board can see it, I said. The room stilled. Even the lake wind seemed to hold its breath. Leonard blinked slowly, his smirk faltering. He hadn't expected resistance, especially polite resistance. That's not how we handle matters privately. It is when privacy is being used as a weapon, I replied. Grace scoffed. Oh please, Jenna. Don't make this dramatic. But her voice trembled under the veneer. I'm not, I said. I'm choosing accuracy over whispers. Michael finally spoke, voice tight. Maybe we can talk about this tomorrow. Leonard snapped, quiet, Michael. And that told me everything. This wasn't Michael's plan. It was Leonard's. And Grace's. And maybe Patricia's by silent alignment. My husband had been the distraction, not the architect. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. I'll head out. Early meeting tomorrow. Running away? Leonard asked, smiling again. No, I said, meeting his eyes. Gathering context. Patricia stood halfway, reaching out as if to stop me without touching me. Jenna, don't make this worse. I'm not making anything, I said softly. I'm watching it unfold. As I grabbed my coat, Leonard tossed out one final taunt. By morning, you'll wish you'd taken the chance to discuss this privately. I paused in the doorway, my hand on the frame. He thought he'd cornered me. He thought the envelope was the endgame. But I'd seen Grace's reflection earlier in the evening, her phone lighting up with a notification preview she hadn't hidden quickly enough. A name. A contact. A familiar file-sharing service with a folder labeled something she never meant me to glimpse. And that was Seed 2. They were coordinating more than a simple envelope. As I stepped outside into the cold lake air, a fresh clarity settled into me. They wanted me afraid of what was in that envelope. But by tomorrow, they'd learn to fear what I had seen in Grace's reflection. The night after the anniversary dinner, I didn't sleep. Not because of the envelope, no, that was predictable. Men like Leonard always believed their power was in the papers they controlled. They never understood that the real power is in the patterns you expose. Before dawn, I sat in my home office with a cup of black coffee, replaying the reflection I'd seen in Grace's phone screen. It had been quick, less than a second, but my mind caught details with the precision of someone trained to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts. An app window. A folder name. A time-stamped file with my initials. Grace had been opening something synced between devices, something she didn't want me to know existed. If the envelope was meant to corner me, that file was the real weapon. The sun wasn't up yet when I left the house. Michael stirred when I slipped out of bed, but I didn't stop long enough for conversation. He called my name once, soft, unsure, but I let the silence answer him. Silence was where truth echoed loudest. At the office, the early morning security guard looked surprised to see me. Board meeting isn't until 9, Mrs. Pierce. I know, I said. I'm here for something else. I went straight to the digital forensics room. Most executives don't know these departments exist. I did. And I knew exactly who to ask. Evan, a systems analyst who'd been with the company 15 years, looked up when I walked in. You're in early. Need a confidential pull, I told him. Board alias inbox. Deleted items. Last 72 hours. Evan blinked. That's technically only accessible with full authorization. I raised an eyebrow. Evan. You know my clearance level. He exhaled. What am I looking for? A message that vanished. He nodded, understanding more than he said. Give me 15 minutes. He got it done in 12. When he handed me the printout, the air around me shifted. Just seeing the email reconstructed from server logs sent something sharp and electric down my spine. Subject line, draft, before she finds out. Timestamp, Tuesday 8:14 p.m. Sent from Grace.Pierce@corporate.board. To Leonard.Pierce@corporate.board. Body, recovered fragments. Use the discrepancies she flagged as justification. Finalize the proposal to transfer her authority. Michael will keep her distracted. Before she sees the registry logs. And the last line, almost fully intact. After the review, we push through the voting shift. She'll be out. Not reassigned. Not sidelined. Out. They were planning to vote me out of my own department, remove my oversight, transfer my authority, and restructure the entire company narrative around a fabricated discrepancy they were preparing to reveal. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't guessing. This was proof, dated, timestamped, and logged. But I needed more. Can you access shared folders synced through board-level devices? I asked Evan. If it's company managed, yes. I wrote down the folder name I'd spotted in Grace's reflection. Check this. Evan typed. The screen blinked. The folder opened. Inside were 7 files. 6 were PDFs titled report_A, report_B, and so on, fabricated performance sheets. Numbers doctored. Approvals forged. My signature copy-pasted from previous documents. Enough to discredit me, if you didn't know what real documentation looked like. But the 7th file froze my breath. A video clip. Timestamp, anniversary dinner, 7:42 p.m. File name, Jenna_Eax.mov. Grace had already labeled a video file for distribution, before she ever knew what my reaction would be. Before Leonard slid the envelope across the table. Before anything happened. They weren't capturing a moment. They were scripting one. And they expected me to perform the role they'd written. I clicked the video. It was footage from her phone, the angle low, pointed at me. She had filmed me when Leonard made the first comment about discrepancies. The clip was only 3 seconds long. But the real problem wasn't the video. It was the metadata. Created 2 hours before the dinner. Meaning Grace had prepared the file name, Jenna_Eax, that afternoon, anticipating humiliation they planned to stage before they even walked into that house. I took a steadying breath, then another. This was the proof. Undeniable. Concrete. Surgical. But I needed to protect it fast. Evan, I said, transfer all of this to my private drive. Encrypt it. Generate a secure hash. He didn't ask why. He just nodded and got to work. While the files copied, my phone buzzed. A message from Michael. We need to talk before the meeting. Please. I let the screen go dark. Because now I knew why he was contacting me early. He'd realized something. He'd sensed something shifting. He was afraid the plan was unraveling and wanted to pull me aside, contain the fallout before I could expose it. But it was too late. As the proof finished transferring, a deep, calm certainty settled into me. They thought they were staging a downfall. Instead, I was building a case. And before confronting them, I turned toward the camera again, the place in the story where viewers are listening, and delivered the second required engagement moment. If you've ever discovered proof in a way the other person never expected, tell me how you found it, and what detail finally confirmed everything. Then I picked up the folder of printed evidence and headed for the boardroom. The stage they built for my humiliation was about to become the stage for their reckoning. The boardroom was already half full when I walked in, crisp folder under my arm, expression neutral. Leonard stood at the far end of the table, speaking to Patricia and Grace in low, confident tones. Michael hovered a few steps away from them, close enough to look included, far enough to look conflicted. The entire scene felt staged, rehearsed, positioned for a narrative they believed they owned. The second I entered, the conversation broke. Leonard straightened. Grace's smile sharpened. Patricia tried to soften the tension with a warm but brittle "Good morning, dear," but even she seemed to be bracing for something. Michael rushed to me first. "Jenna, we should talk, privately, before the meeting starts." The desperation in his voice was new. And revealing. I brushed past him gently. "We'll talk when the timing matters." His face fell. Leonard clapped his hands once, echoing through the room. "Let's begin, shall we? Everybody take your seats." I didn't sit. I placed the folder on the table and stood behind my chair. Leonard lifted a glossy binder, thicker than the envelope from last night, and cleared his throat with theatrical gravity. "Before we proceed with the quarterly review, I believe it is essential to address a matter of competence and leadership." He paused, casting the practiced gaze of a man who enjoyed being the center of every significant moment. Specifically, Jenna's alarming discrepancies. He said my name like it tasted sour. Grace slid her phone onto the table, screen angled toward me again, ready to capture whatever she hoped would be my unraveling. Patricia folded her hands primly, eyes down, choosing alignment through silence. And then Leonard opened his binder. "We found multiple irregularities in your department," he announced. "Approvals you supposedly signed without proper clearance. Expenses misreported. Risk evaluations missing. And because this endangers the company and the family's reputation, we have prepared a transitional plan. One that includes reallocating your authority to a more stable branch of leadership." There it was. The transfer. He turned to the board members around the table. "Today we vote on whether Jenna remains in her current role." I felt the room lean toward his confidence, years of accumulated influence bending perspectives before evidence was even presented. Leonard lifted the first page. "This is the official report." I let him finish his sentence. Then I calmly, quietly said, "No. That is your report. This," I tapped the folder in front of me, "is mine." He froze. Grace's phone stopped recording for a heartbeat. Michael shut his eyes, knowing what was coming. I opened the folder and laid out the first sheet, the recovered email. Bold, time-stamped, authenticated by server logs. The subject line alone cut the room's temperature in half. "Draft, before she finds out." Murmurs broke instantly. Leonard stiffened. "That email was never sent." "It was," I corrected. "You simply deleted it." "But our servers don't lose anything." Grace leaned forward, face paling. "You're misinterpreting." I placed the next page down, the line fragments proving intent to fabricate discrepancies, shift authority, and rely on Michael to keep me distracted. Patricia whispered, "Oh my God." Leonard's voice sharpened. "This is irrelevant. Anyone could." I slid the final piece onto the table. The smoking gun. The video metadata. Created 2 hours before the dinner. Named Jenna_Reacts.mov. A pre-written title for a reaction they planned to provoke. A script for my humiliation. A blueprint for the transfer they were engineering. The room went silent. True, heavy, oxygen-draining silent. Board members leaned forward, reading. Rereading. Processing the timeline, the intent, the manipulation. Finally, one of them, Mr. Hawthorne, spoke. "Leonard, the video file was created before the incident?" "That's impossible," Leonard snapped. "It's in the metadata," I said. Stamped. Verified. And synced to a company-managed device. I let the weight of it settle. Let credibility shift, inch by inch, back where it belonged. Grace scrambled for her phone. Maybe my clock was off, maybe. The server synced the timestamp, I said. Your clock had nothing to do with it. Leonard's jaw clenched so tight his temple twitched. He turned to Michael, fury boiling. You said she didn't know anything. Michael whispered, Dad, stop. Enough. Leonard roared, losing the composure he prized more than truth. We protect this family. We keep control. She was never supposed to. Exposing evidence isn't betrayal, I cut in. Fabricating it is. Another board member spoke. This seems like a deliberate attempt to undermine her. Patricia inhaled sharply, then looked at her husband, the man she'd obeyed for decades, with fresh dread. Leonard, what did you do? I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, you tried to remove me with forged documents and a staged incident. But you forgot one thing, I don't fight with noise. I fight with proof. Michael stepped toward me, defeated. Jenna. I didn't plan any of this. I swear. I didn't. I didn't look at him. Not yet. His choices would matter later. Right now, the room itself was shifting. The vote Leonard promised was no longer his to control. The narrative had flipped. And as the board members exchanged looks, one thought pulsed in the air. Leonard's authority was cracking. And I was the one holding the fault line. The board didn't move immediately. Moments like that, moments where a truth detonates in a room, don't prompt instant action. They prompt stillness. Calculation. Reassessment. The very air felt different as they read through each page again, this time slowly, this time without Leonard's shadow shaping their interpretation. Leonard broke first. This is outrageous, he snapped, though his voice now carried a tremor he couldn't disguise. You're twisting innocent drafts into. Drafts don't include fabricated signatures, Mr. Hawthorne interrupted. Drafts don't instruct your daughter to keep her in line, said another. Patricia pressed a shaking hand over her mouth, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. Grace sank back in her chair, the predatory confidence gone, replaced with disbelief that her own digital footprint had betrayed her. And Michael? Michael looked at me with a mixture of regret and astonishment, like he'd finally realized the gravity of standing on the wrong side of a line drawn days ago. The board chair, Ms. Alden, finally stood. We cannot vote on competence when the evidence shows manufactured cause. This review is suspended. Effective immediately. She turned to me. Jenna, you will maintain full control of your department during internal investigation. Then she turned to Leonard. You, on the other hand, will step back from decision-making authority pending inquiry. And until further notice, all transfer proposals, drafts or otherwise, are frozen. Leonard's face drained of color. You're removing me? We're protecting the company, she replied. Something you claim to value. Grace shot up. You can't sideline him, he is the company. No, Ms. Alden said coolly. He's the man who just tried to manipulate his own daughter-in-law out of her seat. Every ounce of Leonard's empire-building confidence crumbled in that moment. The meeting adjourned in fractured silence. Outside the boardroom, Michael caught up to me. Jenna, please. I didn't know the full plan. I never wanted to hurt you. They said the review would be routine and his voice broke. I thought I could protect you by keeping you calm. You protected their timeline, I said quietly. Not me. Tell me what I can do. I felt the ache behind his words. The guilt. The fear. The recognition that he'd spent weeks orbiting the wrong gravity. For now? I said. Step back. Give me space. And when Hannah asks why things feel different, you tell her the truth in a way she can understand. He nodded, tears held behind a tight blink. I will. I walked past him without another word. His remorse mattered, but not more than my boundaries. The internal investigation lasted 3 weeks. During that time, every doctored file was traced back to one of 3 devices: Leonard's office desktop, Grace's work laptop, and a shared family cloud folder Patricia didn't realize she had access to. Leonard tried arguing oversight, blaming Grace, blaming stress, blaming me, anything but himself. But metadata doesn't bend to ego. By the end, the board formally stripped Leonard of voting power and reassigned him to a symbolic advisory role, something that sounded respectable on paper but held no actual authority. Grace lost her executive privileges and was moved to a non-strategic administrative position. Patricia issued a trembling apology, one I accepted politely but never hinged my trust on again. Michael and I began couples therapy, not for reconciliation, but for clarity. For accountability. For rebuilding on solid ground or dissolving cleanly if we couldn't. And I walked into every meeting that month with my spine straight and my evidence vault organized. But the real victory came when Ms. Alden approached me with a document 4 weeks after the inquiry ended. A restructuring plan. One that placed me, not Leonard, at the head of a newly consolidated department overseeing strategic operations. A move that required updating the corporate directory and renaming the internal portal. She handed me a pen. Choose the new title. I did. Pierce Strategic Operations, Reinforced Division. A rebuilt arm of the company, designed intentionally, protected structurally, and carrying my name on it without apology. 8 months later, the lake house sat empty and quiet when I visited with Hannah. Leonard and Patricia moved to a smaller property 2 towns over. Grace still avoided me at company events, unable to forget the day metadata humbled her. Michael and I co-parented with honesty this time, less pretending, more clarity. The foundation wasn't perfect, but it was real. As I stood on the lake deck, watching the water ripple with the breeze, Hannah tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, is this our house now?" I smiled. "It's our place to start fresh." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't been able to articulate before. You don't rebuild by going back to what was. You rebuild by protecting what will never be taken from you again. And for the first time in years, the future felt entirely, peacefully, mine.